August 2026 became a defining moment. A post on X, the former Twitter, triggered an unprecedented geopolitical alarm in Latin America. The American Congressman Carlos Jimenez, who is part of the Florida Republican Party and Alat Prompista, shared an image generated by artificial intelligence, where President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva appears blindfolded and in custody. The image is a direct replica of the photograph released by United States authorities during the operation to capture the Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. The caption of the post had a short but provocative phrase: "What awaits him?" This post didn't emerge in a vacuum. It represents the peak of the ongoing deterioration of diplomatic relations between the Brazilian government and the influential factions in Washington, fueled by deep disagreements over authoritarian regimes, positions in the Middle East, and security in South America. It's worth remembering, my noble and dear brothers, that Maduro insisted on holding illegitimate elections. He thought that by simply claiming victory, the world would swallow it and respect what they call sovereignty. But true sovereignty is respecting the will of the people, not giving a result that goes against what we see in the streets. If Americans are suspicious that something like this could happen here, this image, my noble and dear brothers, starts to tell us something truly profound. At this moment, many people ask, to what extent a written provocation from a foreign parliamentarian translates into a real intention of international intervention? Could Javier Milei's Argentina be the pivot of an escalation of isolation and pressure on Brazil? In this video, we will thoroughly analyze the geopolitical variables, the strong criticisms of Brazilian foreign policy, and the distance between heated rhetoric and real international politics. I'm Davi. Welcome to Encarando O Sobrenatural Official. Since there's no more time to waste and a lot to talk about here, grab your acerola juice and your salami sandwich with ketchup, and let's start our segment, Señores do Mundo. Señores do Mundo. Folks, to understand the impact of the image published by Carlos Jimenez, we need to go back to the beginning of 2026. The capture of Nicolas Maduro by American forces drastically changed the balance of power in South America. The reaction of the Brazilian government was a strong condemnation of the American military action, classifying it as a violation of international sovereignty. From that moment on, Brazil's official position generated direct friction with sectors of the United States Congress. The American opposition and sectors of the Brazilian right argue that the Plan Alto adopts a policy of leniency toward authoritarian regimes, citing the historical rapprochement with Caracas, Havana, and Managua. And we can break this down into 2 points. The autocratic alignment. Critics point out that Brazil is reluctant to strongly condemn human rights violations when they are committed by governments that are ideologically aligned with the left. The second is positioning in the Middle East. Statements that equate defensive actions with acts of genocide and refuse to categorically classify Hamas and Hezbollah as terrorist organizations. By maintaining exclusive alignment with the UN lists, they fuel strong reactions in the US Congress. This combination of factors has placed Brazil at the center of the electoral and geopolitical debate in the Western Hemisphere. From the perspective of critics of the current government, both in the domestic opposition and among conservative lawmakers abroad, Brazil's international vulnerability is not limited to diplomacy, but extends to security management and governance. There are 3 main areas of friction being discussed on the international stage. The first is transnational organized crime. The pressure for the United States and international organizations to classify Primeiro Comando da Capital, PCC, and Comando Vermelho, CV, as foreign terrorist organizations, FTOs, has increased exponentially. Critics argue that the Brazilian government's hesitation to adopt this same classification limits overt cooperation efforts and projects an image of passivity in the face of the factions that control shipping routes, drug trafficking and money laundering in South America, the controversies over scandals and corruption, The public debate is marked by allegations involving the use of public resources, management scandals, and reviews of convictions from Operation Car Wash. For international right-wing analysts, the perception of impunity and the weakening of anti-corruption mechanisms undermine the credibility of Brazilian institutions in the eyes of investors and foreign governments. The third is the relationship with the non-Western bloc. The positions taken within the BRICS and the closer ties with powers like Beijing and Moscow are seen by Washington as a gradual distancing from the liberal democracies of the West, exposing the country to economic sanctions or diplomatic retaliation. The diplomatic relationship between Brazil and Buenos Aires is going through one of the coldest periods in recent history. The constant exchanges of accusations between Lula and Javier Milei have gone beyond the personal sphere and affected the dynamics of Mercosur. Given this scenario, the theory arises that Argentina could serve as a proxy for isolation or intervention actions sponsored by foreign powers. And we will analyze this possibility from the perspective of geopolitical realism. The hypothesis of regional pressure. Milei's Argentina seeks to align itself unconditionally with Washington and Tel Aviv. In a scenario of a hypothetical escalation of American sanctions against Brazil, Argentina could act as a platform for political and logistical pressure in the Southern Cone, serving as a base for intelligence operations and military cooperation with the United States, promoting Brazil's diplomatic isolation within South American forums, and leading an alternative economic bloc focused on bilateral free trade agreements outside the Mercosur structure. Although Milei has at least talked about this or tried to do something like it, for many experts, a military invasion is geopolitically unlikely. Although the rhetoric of confrontation is intense, the possibility of a direct military invasion against Brazil by foreign forces using Argentina is extremely remote for the following reasons: economic and human cost. A military destabilization in Brazil would cause the economic collapse of all of South America, directly affecting multinational interests and the global supply of food and commodities. Another reason that would prevent such an action by an Argentina defending American rights would be the doctrine of international relations. American diplomacy prioritizes the use of soft power in large sovereign states. Targeted economic sanctions, such as the Magnitsky Act, visa restrictions, and financial blockades, instead of direct military actions. If a military invasion is ruled out by military strategy manuals, what should we really expect from the Brazilian government in the face of the hardening of Western foreign policy? But more political and economic pressure, individual sanctions, the application of financial restrictions, and the cancellation of visas for Brazilian authorities, judges, and politicians accused by American lawmakers of human rights violations or support for sanctioned regimes. Trade barriers and tariffs. The application of retaliatory tariffs on the grounds of state subsidies or violations of environmental and anti-organized crime commitments. Isolation in multilateral forums, the weakening of Brazil's candidacy for permanent seats in security organizations, and a reduction of influence in the OECD. The image posted by Congressman Carlos Gimenez is therefore a symbol of narrative warfare and political pressure. It aims to fuel internal opposition and destabilize the international image of the Brazilian executive, and to signal that a possible change of government in Washington or a conservative alignment in South America will bring severe diplomatic costs to the Brazilian presidency. Brazil finds itself at a diplomatic crossroads. On one hand, it defends the tradition of neutrality and the so-called respect for the sovereignty of peoples. On the other hand, it faces severe accusations of complacency with authoritarianism and hesitation in the face of transnational organized crime. The offensive statements and social media posts reveal the extent of the polarization that has spilled over national borders. The crisis with Milei's Argentina and the distancing of conservative sectors in the United States are clear warnings that the international scene does not tolerate ambiguities on issues such as security, democracy, and the fight against Madurismo, without demanding a high political price. So, my noble and dear brothers, considering what has happened so far, to think that just because a parliamentarian posted this image, Brazil will be invaded tomorrow is a bit much. But we also can't rule out that it started exactly like this with Maduro. Although the scenario is completely different, because even though many people don't pay attention to the details, Maduro was convicted in a US court. So things just didn't happen the way many people believe. Trump didn't just suddenly say, go get Maduro and bring him here. It wasn't like that. There was an investigation, there was a conviction, and finally a president with the courage to go after it and carry out those sentences. In the case of Lula, for something similar to happen to him, the same process would have to take place. In countries like the United States, where democracy truly prevails, actions need to follow all legal procedures, including the right to defense. Maduro often gave up his right to defend himself, and because of that, today he pays a high price. After all, he is in fact guilty. One of the things that makes me, Davi, personally believe in the possibility of this mess escalating a lot is precisely because we don't know who Maduro was involved with. And we know that over there, my friend, he's singing like a bird. You can even see how much the man has lost weight since he was arrested. And it's not because there's a lack of food, no. But you can't compare the life of luxury he had at the cost of his own people's blood. And let's be honest, not just the blood of his own people, but of many others too. Because international trafficking has bosses, it has a way of operating. And those who are involved are literally in a situation where they're walking on a razor's edge. And many believe that there are big, important people involved here in our country. Is that true? If all of this is true, my brothers, we're going to see this conflict escalate to an unimaginable level. It's no wonder that Molusco himself has been talking about it, right? He was always against rearming our army, buying state-of-the-art weapons to protect the country's sovereignty. Since he was very surprised to find out that the way things are today, we can't fight anyone at all. To wrap up our video, I think the crucial point will be these elections that will take place at the end of this year. If Brazil, that is, if Molusco, leaves even a shadow of doubt in the Americans' minds, you can be sure. My dear brother, there will be an unprecedented escalation that will go down in history in the coming months. You can be sure of that if they try to do something similar to what they did with Maduro, announce a result that's not real, or at the last minute pull something off. Like Ortega, who cancelled his elections in Nicaragua because he knew the frauds he wanted to commit would no longer be tolerated. The United States would be watching, just like they said they would be watching Brazil's elections. My brothers, a lot is going to happen in this situation. You can be sure of that, and we will be paying close attention to bring you all the information just as it is. So, to say now that there will be an intervention or something like that is an exaggeration. But as I said, if those factors happen, then yes, my brother, you will see an escalation, and something like that wouldn't be out of the question. God bless you, take care, and that's it for this video. I'm out.